I was a young entrepreneur cleaning buildings.
Right.
I had a townhouse in Denver.
Right.
I had 4 or 5 cars, all with car payments. Like I had it going on, right? I was making good money.
Hey, this is Deb, and this is Happy Hour with Deb. And I don't even know what to say. I've got one of my dear friends, Dan Schindler, here with me today. Huge entrepreneur, and I want to dig into the story.
All right.
Because you started this at a very young age. Take me way back when you were a kid.
Way back, 12 years old.
Right.
Yeah, so 12 years old. So my dad and my uncle both had janitorial businesses.
Okay.
They started in the industry actually together when I was really small, and they couldn't get along, so they decided to sort of part ways. And what happened was my dad actually bought a contract from my uncle. Oh. And he bought it as it was a really small building, and this was way back in the 70s. And so he ended up, that building, like right when he bought the contract, they ended up building a new building, which was 42,000 square feet, which now in my world, I don't think that's a big deal. Back then I did.
Right, right.
And so my dad actually ended up cleaning that building for 26 years.
Wow.
And so
that's customer service right there.
Yeah.
You're with somebody for 26 years.
Yeah. And so it worked perfect for him. My dad was in the ministry, so he didn't get paid to be a minister. And so I remember every day he left at 3:50. And he was usually home by 8:30, 9 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And I think in the early 80s, he was making like $60,000 a year. And so,
wow.
Cleaning part-time.
Right.
So
that's a lot of money back then.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
We
lived in a beautiful home. And so, my kind of first taste of entrepreneurialism was just kind of watching my dad. He did a little bit of residential carpet cleaning during the day. And so that, I was always an entrepreneur at heart. Like early on, I remember my next door neighbor, they were trying to build a greenhouse. Well, they ended up getting like halfway through the greenhouse and they decided not to do it. So I told my buddy, I was like, hey, we're going to make a hobby shop here. So we went down to the Kmart. We bought all these little, cars and put them all on the pegboard, and we were open for business. Of course, the only customers we ever got were our parents, but it was just that entrepreneurial mind. Yeah. So at age 12, my dad started taking me. This was long. Nowadays, we can't do this, but back then you could get
Child
away with it.
Laws.
Yeah, that.
Somebody gets
that, and customers don't like kids running around buildings. Exactly. But anyway, he would take me to work, and so in our industry, we have backpack vacuum cleaners, and that's how we can cover a lot of square footage because it's super efficient. You're not dragging a vacuum behind you. But back then we had these.
It is super efficient.
Yeah, very
efficient. Why didn't we think of that?
I can tell you the day they came out. Like I was 16-ish years old when I saw my very first backpack vacuum cleaner. And the first one I ever saw was like a guy took a canister vac and just straps to it. And so we were running around the building vacuuming with like a canister vac strapped to our back.
Wow. That was long before it was cool to wear the backpacks.
You're right. Yeah. Now it's super cool.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, my job at 12 was to follow him around with the canister vac and just make sure it didn't run into the walls going through door frames and stuff like that. So that's kind of my first little gig.
So was your dad very driven? Because I have found with working with entrepreneurs and interviewing that it always comes like it's through the family. They learn. Your dad was always, and your grandfather.
My grandfather was not an entrepreneur, but he was a brilliant man. He was an engineer. He worked for Boeing. But he was the typical, he worked for PPG Glass. And he worked towards his pension, and he stayed with the same company for his whole career. Yeah. And so I think entrepreneurialism kind of started with my uncle. My uncle is the oldest in the family, and my dad is the youngest.
Okay.
And so
was he in this business also?
So my uncle was in the business, but he was at I say scale in the 80s. If you had 20 accounts, that was scale back then. Most people, it was all, our industry was run by mom and pop type style things. There wasn't corporate conglomerates. There wasn't like we are today. And so he had about 20 accounts. He had a buddy that was like a inside sales guy that never left his house but could sell contracts from home. And so he'd get on the phone and call.
Long before the COVID work.
Yeah, exactly. He was just like a recluse. He would never come out. Like when you went to go pick up your paychecks, he would just put them in the mailbox and you just go out there and grab. Yeah, exactly. I never actually met the guy in person. It was the strangest thing, but he could sell deals left and right over the phone.
Wow.
It was crazy. So my uncle had about 20 contracts. And then I was 15 years old. I had a mullet. I had the tight rolled jeans from the 80s and the parachute pants.
Can we scan a picture of that? Can we get a picture
I can give you a picture of that.
We want a picture of that to intro in with.
I've got a picture of me standing by my Fiero with a mullet. So yeah, I can get you that picture. But no, so anyway, at 15, we'd have our family, get-togethers. My uncle, he kind of brought two things to me. He brought aviation into my world, and he also brought the cleaning business into my world. And so he lived on an airport, and he had an airplane in his backyard. And so as a kid, we'd go to Thanksgiving dinners at his house, and we would go jump in the plane, fly around for a while, come back, eat dessert. Yeah. So I grew up in airplanes.
Fascinating as a child.
Yeah.
To see that.
And yeah, so I grew up in airplanes and cleaning toilets. So
diverse.
Yeah, right. So anyway, kind of my uncle was the one that really showed me like you could scale these businesses. So at 15, I started like bugging him like, hey, I want to come work for you. I want to clean buildings. And he just kept brushing me off. He was like, no, man,
right.
You don't represent well. You got a mullet, all those things. And so my birthday's in January. December, when I was still 15, my dad and my uncle on Christmas had taken my grandparents home. And on the way back, they got rear-ended by an 18-wheeler. And so both of them were in the same car, put them both on. They got back injuries, so they were both on disability for a year. Wow. And so at 16 years old, I bought my first Fiero, and I went to work.
Yeah.
So I started. I had 40-year-old guys working for me that helped. My dad had to hire some additional guys to help with his building, and then I was cleaning all the buildings that my uncle had. So in our world, the average person can clean maybe 50,000 square feet a night. I made it my goal, and I at kind of the peak of where I was at when I was still cleaning buildings, I cleaned 300,000 square feet a night. And so I learned how to be
as a child.
Yeah, 16, 17 years old, yeah.
Always been driven.
Always been driven.
Wow.
I drove myself so, like in my early 20s, I drove myself so hard that I had 3 car wrecks falling asleep at the wheel.
Oh.
And 2 of those I should have died.
You're the most mellow man I know. You would never know. I'm like, I want to work in this beautiful building.
So yeah, I had one. I was just I fell asleep at the wheel, and I woke up, and all I saw was a telephone pole.
Ugh.
And I swerved like this, and my back tire hit the pole, and there must have been like a nail sticking out because it cut a perfect square in the sidewall of my tire. And I'm going through this cornfield at like 60 miles an hour, swerving. Like I was awake at that point,
Right.
So,
with the mullet still.
With the mullet, yeah. I kept the mullet.
This is a fascinating story, Dan. We should get some beer in here, Bradley. Roll some drinks in this place.
So yeah, I kept the mullet until I got married with my first wife. Yeah,
Wow.
I walked into the lady that always cut my hair, and I said, "Hey, give me the married man's haircut, whatever that looks like." And so off went with the mullet. My dad swore that I'd have a mullet until I was 90 years old. So
you could rock it.
Yeah, I'm
could
thinking
totally
about doing it again.
Yeah, do it. We'll get you a happy hour T-shirt.
Yeah.
Get the mullet.
Yeah.
Talk to us about aviation. Your love, your passion. Tell us how you get into that.
So again, my uncle, he bought me for my, it must have been my 16th birthday. He bought me 2 hours of flight training.
Wow.
And so
Now that's a birthday gift.
Yeah.
Don't get your kids iPads.
No,
Teach them how to fly planes.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
And so I went and took those 2 lessons. And of course, I was cleaning buildings by this point. And I was a fair weather flyer. So it actually took me 2 years to get my private pilot's license. It took me 1 year to solo. There was probably like 4 or 5 people that I knew that were close to me that died in plane crashes that first year that I was learning to fly. And in fact, one of them was the airport manager, and another guy that was the president of the EAA chapter. They both died in a plane crash.
When they were flying, or they were
Yeah,
flying?
they were flying.
Whoa.
So they got into a flat spin, and they couldn't recover because there was a CG problem in the airplane.
Wow.
And so they just went straight into the ground. They didn't have parachutes on. And so I had a lot of mental things I had to overcome,
I bet.
but I was still driven. I was like, I want to fly. I know this is something I want to do. I know it's safe, but there was so many mental things.
Yeah.
That
Well, especially people that you know passing away.
Yeah.
That you trained with. That's crazy.
So I ended up like like the average person can solo, and like I was also a flight instructor, so an average person can solo an airplane within 15 to 20 hours. It took me 55 hours to solo. And it was just because I had so many mental hurdles that I was trying to overcome with, people getting paid. A lot of people would be like, we're surprised you even stayed with it. But I was determined to get it done.
So what's the mindset after, you're flying and you've had these people pass away? Like, what's the feeling when you're sitting in the cockpit?
You're scared to death.
I can't even imagine.
So there were times where I would be with my flight instructor and I would sit on the wheel of the airplane and I would puke on the ramp. And I would drink some water because my nerves were so shot. And I would say, okay, I feel good. Let's roll. So we'd get in the plane. We'd go fly. And we'd get in the air. And I would constantly look over at my flight instructor. And I would just have this mindset, as long as he's at peace and he looks good and everything. And
don't freak out till he freaks out.
Yeah, if he starts freaking out, then we're both going to freak out. Which became actually a good way for me to cope, and like even in the business world when you're dealing with things that happen, you get hit with a major thing. I think part of me working through that flying aspect, forcing myself to get my pilot's license, forcing myself to overcome those fears, actually helped me deal with things in the business as I came across major crossroads, or we had major, we got sued one time and that should have run us out of business, just different things. I look back and I realized, it was those moments in my life where I pushed through and I made sure That's
a very important lesson for entrepreneurs, because when people start companies, I mean, yours was in the family and you'd been doing this and the planes were in your family, but you're not prepared to be served with a lawsuit. So really the mental toughness is, when you're an entrepreneur, that's what you got it. That's the thing people are missing. You're not ready for some door.
I always joke because I always make the reference to, I'll be like, oh, that wasn't in the brochure.
Right.
Like I didn't sign up for that. You see this brochure on entrepreneurialism and it's like, oh, this is all the limelight and all the glowing lights and how wonderful it is to run your own business. And
you're not getting a regular paycheck.
Yeah, but they don't tell you about all the nights that you don't sleep and all the times you don't get paid and all those pieces.
It is. And that you're the last one to get paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pay everybody before I pay myself. Yeah, it's crazy. So how long have you been flying? And now, how many planes? 2?
I have 3 planes right now.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Tell everybody, because I've heard the story about constructing the planes, and this is now your passion. You know everything.
Yeah.
Bravo, because you were terrified to go. I'm terrified to go, but, statistically it is safer to fly than it is to drive in a car.
Yeah. And obviously smaller airplanes have a little bit higher risk, but a lot of that has to do with, if you look at most small plane accidents, it's pilot error for the most part. Wow. There are mechanical things that happen, catastrophic engine failures or different things that can obviously happen, but you train for those things. Yeah. And then you do the very best that you can. And the irony is that when I've been in situations in airplanes, I'm the calmest. I had a situation where I was actually with an instructor and we were up in Denver and we were flying, and the exhaust manifold fell off of the engine in flight, and we were only able to make like 1,700 RPMs of power, which doesn't hardly keep you in the air, especially in Denver. And he was in total panic, and I was flying the airplane, and I was like, I looked over at him. I'm like, the plane's still flying, man. And the runway's right there. Like, we'll just hold this altitude. We'll fly really slow. We'll get there. This will be fine. And of course, it worked out fine.
That's amazing, because you came through your own fears for the breakthrough, and now you're talking down somebody else.
Yeah, and then
that's incredible.
And then I thought back. I was like, it's funny because I used to look to my flight instructor for that confidence and that peace. And then I was put in a situation where I had to give my flight instructor the confidence, like, hey, we got this. We're going to land this airplane. It's going to be fine.
That's crazy. So, that's a full life
it's a full
lesson
circle.
There. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
And that does bleed into business.
It does.
And it really teaches you a lot of things. So you have 3 planes. Where do you fly out of?
Dallas Executive. For anybody that's been in Dallas for a really long time, it used to be called Redbird. So it's South Dallas off of 67 and 20 down there off Hampton.
All right. What's your fave?
As far as my airplanes?
Plane,
my favorite is the Atom A500, my biggest airplane. It's the most, when I'm doing like cross-country flights, it's the most comfortable because it's pressurized and has air conditioning and all that good stuff.
Wow. So do you take your family like on trips? Everywhere you go, you take your plane?
Yeah.
That's
All right. I'm supposed to do
Bradley,
a trip.
I don't want a tour bus now. Scrap the tour bus.
Yeah, you want a jet now?
Yeah, I want a jet. I want to fly with Dan in a jet. I'd be terrified. I'd be the one in the co-pilot seat. You'd be like, Deb, just take it down. You're going to be fine.
Right.
That's crazy. So is it just for just for pleasure now, or do you take it for business trips?
No, we do. So we have an office in Shreveport, Louisiana. So we fly there. We actually just did a trip last month with the guys over there to go see a customer. Fly down to Houston a lot for business things. So yeah, it's kind of a mix of both, personal and business.
Wow. Where's the furthest you've ever gone?
Flying wise?
Yeah.
I mean, probably nonstop flights would be like here to Savannah, Georgia. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty hefty flight in a small airplane.
That is a hefty flight in a small airplane.
Yeah, because you're basically going from here to the East Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Florida, South Texas can be pretty good.
Yeah, Texas is its own massive country in itself. How many people does it seat?
So my big airplane seats 6, including the pilot. So 2 up front and 4 in the back.
Wow.
And then my medium-sized airplane seats 4, including the pilot. And then I have a little small airplane that's a STOL airplane, which stands for short takeoff and landing. So it'll actually take off in about 120 feet or so. And it's just it's a toy.
It sounds. Are your kids interested in?
So my daughter is, she's a type 1 diabetic. So we've had some challenges with getting her medical through the FAA. And so we're still working through those challenges.
Yeah.
And she just finished.
It's a terrible disease.
Oh, it's tough.
It's really tough.
And she's been that way since she was 2. So she really doesn't know any other.
Yeah.
That's Matthew's girlfriend.
Yes. We love Matthew. Welcome to the family, Matthew. Matthew will be sitting in that chair someday.
Yeah.
Love Matthew.
So, yeah. So she really loves aviation. She's, she loves to fly with me. I put her, because I was an instructor, I was able to put her in the left seat and put her behind the yoke, really early in life. So I've got a lot of, your Facebook memories pop up, and it's always me and her flying with our little selfie. So she loves,
awesome.
She loves airplanes. She loves aviation. So we're crossing our fingers and hoping she can get her medical. Then I'll eventually teach her how to fly.
How about your wife?
She tolerates it.
Right.
She's
I'd be in the back, like buffing my name.
Yeah.
Same.
She wants to sit in the back with her feet propped up. And,
right.
Yeah.
Well, why would you not, though?
Yeah.
You think about it. I mean, for my entire career when I've traveled, I had to do it on a budget, and now I don't have to. So it's kind of nice. I'm going to be honest. That
I'm actually getting to that point, honestly, where I'm like, you know what? I've got a friend of mine that's kind of a contract pilot, and I've seriously thought about, I'm just going to hire him so I can sit in the back,
so you
relax.
Right.
Because there's a lot of stress, when you're flying. There's a lot of demand on you. You go somewhere, you're constantly checking the weather. You're constantly making sure, are we going to make it back? Are we going to get stuck here? Do we need to, so there's a constant, you can never decompress on vacation because you're just constantly thinking about like, what are we doing? How are we going to get home?
Oh, no,
those
it's going to rain tomorrow.
So if I had a pilot flying me, I could just be like, whatever, they got it.
Just bring more champagne. We're going to be fine. Yeah, exactly. I totally get that. That's understandable. All right, let's talk about this business. How did you start this?
So I worked my career through aviation. I got all of my ratings. Aviation is actually what brought me to Texas. So I did all
the great state of Texas.
The great country of Texas.
That's right. We love our Texas. Dan and I have the same, we could have matching offices, you and I.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we could.
We love our Texas.
We do.
For sure.
We do.
It's a good place.
I'm very thankful that I ended up here, and I don't want to be anywhere else.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Like I go other places and I'm like, it's just not Texas.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cool places, but it's just not Texas.
Yeah.
And opening a business here, what's that like? Because, I mean, people are just so humble and kind here.
I don't know if I want to say that, then everybody's going to want to come here.
Right. Well, we're full.
Yeah, we're full.
For the listeners, we're full. Yeah. You can't come here unless you have a friend or something to get in.
Right. So I did all of my flight training in Colorado Springs, Colorado. My flight instructor that did most of my training there was actually from Mesquite, Texas.
Okay.
And he had left a flight school in Mesquite to go back to the college, and he had trained at the same college, so it was like full circle for him. So as we were doing a flight lesson one day, he's like, hey, I really feel like, because I was asking him, like, where's a good place to go as a flight instructor, all that. He's like, man, you need to go work for it was a little mom and pop flight school, little couple from the Philippines. And so I walked in one day on the job board, and there was a job board posting from the flight school that he worked at, and they were actually replacing his position since he had left.
No way.
And so I was like, hey, Brian, can you call, her name was Torito. I said, hey, can you call Torito and like hook me up? And he's like, yeah. So I flew down for an interview. Just fell in love with the couple. They were just the sweetest couple ever.
Awesome.
And they just had this cute little small flight school, and it was like perfect for me. And I was going to be the only instructor, so I had the whole flight school to myself.
Right.
And
That's
it was just
great.
Yeah, it was just amazing.
You're the head man in charge.
Yeah, it was everything. I had to run the office. I did it all. So it was great. And so my daughter was born on July 1st, 1997. So she was induced, and we scheduled me to start working down here on July 10th, 97. So had her, loaded up the U-Haul, came here. And it was kind of a shock. It was very interesting because I went from, as a young entrepreneur cleaning buildings.
Right.
I was I had a townhouse in Denver.
Right.
I had 4 or 5 cars, all with car payments. Like I had it going on, right? I was making good money. And I got here like full poverty. Couldn't hardly feed my family.
Yeah,
my first
starting
year,
completely from the bottom again.
0.
Yeah.
Like my first year as a flight instructor, I'll never forget the number. I made $8,778.
That's not even enough to buy the diapers.
The entire year.
Right.
And so because
your wife's like, you're going to need to step it up, sir. This isn't working.
I can tell you where I was standing when I had to make a call to the IRS because I still owed them some back taxes from being self-employed and running the janitorial.
Right.
And I remember at the time it was like, to me, it seemed like a huge dollar amount, but it may have only been like $2,500.
Right.
But I remember being on the phone with the IRS, and they were going through their criteria, and they were like, dude, you don't make enough money to even like put you on a payment plan. They're like, call us back when you start making money again, We're
gonna throw you a bonus and just be like, well, you don't even have to pay this.
Yeah.
$2,500.
Yeah.
But when you're making $8,000, $2,500, it's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And so but I remember it was so funny because I remember my dad had sold his house, went to England. He was on the mission field. And I remember being on the phone with my dad and saying, I'm as happy as I've ever been.
That's amazing.
I'm in the air 8 hours a day.
Right.
I'm sharing my passion with people. I'm teaching people to fly.
Yeah.
I'm watching the excitement in there.
Can't put a price tag on that.
You can't put a price tag on that.
Nope.
But then reality sets in and you're like, man, at some point I got to pay bills. And so
grown up moment.
Yeah. So I did
gotta
that.
buy diapers for that cute baby.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but the beauty, and so the thing that I love the most about aviation is that you can't play in the aviation game unless you have money. And so being a 23-year-old flight instructor, every single day of the week, I taught multimillionaires how to fly. And every single flight, it was like a one-on-one coach.
That's amazing.
In the airplane.
What an incredible opportunity.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And so I got to sit there and I got to give them the gift of teaching them to fly.
Yeah.
And they got to give me the gift of sharing their business experiences and just everything about,
wow. That's a win-win.
The other amazing thing about aviation is you get in an airplane with a guy that's a lawyer, a doctor, a type A personality, a narcissist. I don't care who they are.
Right.
They're way up here.
Right.
But you put them in an airplane, they are all ears listening to that 23-year-old kid telling them, like, because they know, like, if something goes wrong, we're all dead, right?
You're right. Yeah, you've got their lives. Yeah,
it was a really, like, the privilege of my life was being able to sit with all these millionaires, teach them to fly, but yeah, I learned so many business principles on those flights that it just kept like sparking that fire in my entrepreneurial.
That's amazing because you were driven anyway. So I mean, gosh, this was like the perfect combination. See, you really do end up in the right places with the right people.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
do.
Truthfully.
Yeah, because I wouldn't be here where I am today if I would have stayed in Colorado cleaning buildings.
Right.
Like I'd still be cleaning buildings. I would have never figured out like how to scale,
I think you would have figured out.
Maybe so.
But most people probably would not have figured out.
Yeah, maybe so.
So tell me what happened then. So now you're young, you've got a daughter, you're making $8,000 a year.
Yeah. So
at that point, I'd have to buy you dinner.
Well, actually, that's funny you say that because I scheduled one particular student every day at lunch. And he knew we would go eat lunch together and then we would go fly.
Right.
And that was his gift to me was he bought me lunch every day because he knew that I couldn't afford it.
Wow.
And him and I are actually really good friends to this day.
That's fantastic.
I've watched his business grow from, I think back then it was doing like $1 million a year and he's doing like 25, 30 million a year now.
Wow.
And
that's
so
incredible.
I've got to watch him grow and he's got to watch me grow and we still share aviation together because he's, moved on and bought nice airplanes and all that. So that was fun.
That's
so.
a great story too.
It is.
That,
It is. And the relationships relationships that you develop are just, you can't.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That is truly, life is about connections with good people.
It is.
Humble and kind. So talk about this business.
Yeah, so one more step in aviation. I went to work for a company. We did all the UPS feeder routes.
Well, that's huge.
Yeah, so I went from whatever that $8,000 a month or a year divided by 12 to a big whopping $1,800 a month as a line pilot. So I was in heaven. But within 2 years, I started noticing gaps in their business, and so this is a multi-million-dollar business that does contract work for UPS. And as a line pilot, I started noticing gaps in management. And so I just went straight into the director of operations and I said, I know I'm just a line pilot. I know I've only worked here for 6 months, but here's all the gaps that I see right now in the organization, and here's where I think I can help. And so I immediately went from being a line pilot to third in command of the company.
That's incredible.
I was basically like the assistant chief pilot. They called me manager of training. But I actually went through and developed a training program. I developed their onboarding programs. I went through their whole SOP of operations, fixed a bunch of broken pieces, and then that was kind of my entry level of like, wow, I can do this. I can hang out with these high level executives. Yeah. And so I started like exposing myself to that world. The thing I learned early on as an entrepreneur is to always say yes and expose yourself to as many people as you can.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I was talking to a good friend of mine a couple of days ago, and he was throwing all these ideas at me, and he goes, well, you can think about those. And I just said, you know what? I say yes.
Yeah.
Like absolutely. Whatever it is, let's try it. Like
people are like, just
if we try it and
let's go.
Yeah. If we try it and we fail, like, okay, we tried. Now I know, check that box. I'm not good at whatever that is, And so as I was flying the routes for this company that I worked for, I was constantly reading books on entrepreneurialism and how to scale business. And so I would set the autopilot and I would just read books because you'd have, hours of boredom because you're just flying straight.
What's your favorite book? What was the one that moved you?
So the thing that moved the needle for me was actually Tony Robbins. And there's
great man, great coach, just a legend.
So what happened is I was so poor in flying, I decided to reach out to a local janitorial company here in town, and I started doing subcontract work, cleaning buildings at night to supplement my income.
Wow.
Well, then they saw so I ended up, through that, I ended up becoming an operations manager for them. And then I was flying and being an ops person and cleaning buildings at night, trying to put all those pieces together. And so I had a building that I cleaned, and I could tell the story because they're out of business now, so nobody cares. But so every night, and this will date me, but every night I went into the building. The CEO of the corporation had all the Tony Robbins cassettes on his bookshelf.
Right.
And so every night I went in to clean, I would grab the cassette that I finished or that I left off from the night before. I'd throw it in my Sony Walkman, and I would just, every time I always looked forward to cleaning that building because I knew I could get the Tony Robbins cassettes and start listening to those. And I started just changing my mindset about, one of the things that Tony Robbins talks about is it's, until the pain of change or the pain you're in exceeds the pain of change.
Yes.
And so I started identifying the pains in my life. Like, what's a pain point right now? Well, a huge pain point is I'm working 20 hours a day and I'm broke.
Right.
So how do I fix that problem?
Right.
And so working through just that philosophy. And again, I remember when I actually had enough money, I could buy my own CDs of Tony Robbins. I was so excited.
Wow.
And I was like, I got this. And then the UPS man threw him over our fence and the dog chewed him up.
Stop it.
So I was like, I can't get my own Tony Robbins CDs. What's up with it?
I got to go back and clean that up.
Yeah. So no, Tony Robbins really changed my life.
Many entrepreneurs credit their success to Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
I mean, that man is amazing.
Yeah.
And still very humble and
still full of energy. I don't know how old he is today, but I went to an event of his several years ago, and I'm like, man, this guy, they say he can go 12 hours on one talk.
I've never seen him. I've seen Mel Robbins speak, which is also, she's very powerful too.
Yeah.
But she's more newer in the game than.
Yeah.
But Tony Robbins is the go-to motivator coach for people,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that credit their success to Tony Robbins.
Yeah. I didn't really, you saw him on the infomercials back when I was a kid or whatever, because that's how they did it back then. There was no social media or anything.
No, right.
And so I didn't really know.
That might have been a better way. probably should maybe lean towards that.
Maybe go back to that, right?
It's a little creepy right now.
Yeah. So no, I guess I just got the bug, and I knew like, and then I would sit in the meetings with this company that I was and I would literally say to myself, if these idiots can run, that particular business was doing about $4 million in janitorial at the time.
Wow.
And I would just be like, if these guys can do it, anybody can do it.
Yes.
And so September 11th happened. I was actually in the air the day that the towers were hit.
Unbelievable.
I was not aware of what happened. I landed. I was actually flying out to Greenville, Mississippi, and I was supposed to interview a pilot that we were going to hire for a new route. So I was supposed to fly with him, interview him. So I get on the ground with the airplane. I have a mechanic with me, and we ended up getting stuck there for 3 days, and I had to get permission to get home and all that long story. But
wow.
Anyway, I got back from that situation, and everybody in management for our company was in, complete, like everybody was in panic.
I bet.
Routes were getting canceled. UPS didn't know what to do.
Scary time.
So I walked into my director of operations' office, and he said, "Hey, I'm really sorry. We're going to have to cut your salary by like $1,100 a month," which was huge for me.
Absolutely.
And so I just said, you know what? I'm going to quit. And I called my wife on the phone, and I said, I just quit my job, and we're going to start a janitorial company. And she's like, you did what? So anyway.
We still need to eat.
Yeah. So Integrity Facility Solutions actually started out as janitorial concepts.
Okay.
And basically my day looked like, if everybody thinks entrepreneurial is being so glamorous, my day looked like...
It's the ugliest job.
No. So I started my day at, it's easier to say by PM. So I started my day at 6 p.m. I would clean buildings, all contracts that I landed myself. So before I actually had any buildings, I just cold called all day, knocking doors, handing brochures. I always had the mindset of big business from day one.
Yeah.
So I never put on my business card like owner, operator, none of that. I just put sales operations. Like I never walked in and said,
every door open.
Yeah, I never walked in and said, hey, I'm the business owner. I just was like always thinking bigger than outside of myself. And so once I got enough accounts where I was able to clean buildings, I worked from 6 p.m. at night to 6 a.m. in the morning. I would sleep from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. I would get up at 10 a.m. and cold call from 10 to 2.
Wow.
And then I was sometimes 3, depending on what the kids' schedule was. I'd go home, spend a couple hours with the kids, eat dinner, repeat. And then on weekends, me, my wife, our oldest daughter, who was 11 or 12 at the time, we would strip and wax and clean carpets and work all weekend. And some of those strip and wax jobs would take 40 hours at a time.
Wow.
So it was nonstop. You couldn't just stop in the middle of a job. So you'd start at Friday at 5 o'clock.
It has to be done by the time you go on Monday.
Yeah, you'd walk out at noon on Sunday, and you just have to, force yourself to.
That goes back to when you were young, always just so driven.
Yep.
That's incredible. So how'd you grow into this company now that's so big?
So just kept on. So our very first office, I swapped it with a guy. It was in Addison, at the Addison airport. Ironically, I keep being attracted to airports. So I met a friend through aviation.
Where your heart is.
Through aviation, and this guy owned the building. And I said, hey, we'll clean the bathrooms and the common areas if you'll just give me one little small 100 square foot office space. We'll just do a swap because I can't afford to pay you the rent.
Right.
And so I cleaned his common areas and stuff once a week. He gave us a room that was actually smaller than this studio, probably about a quarter the size of this studio.
Wow.
And I remember when I had my first subcontractor interview come in for this group I wanted to hire, and they were all like wall to wall in there. And I'm like pitching this is going to be the best company in the world and just all this. And then kind of phase 2 was I gathered a bunch of guys from church, and I was like, hey, I can only pay you guys like $700 a month each, but I'll work out a pretty aggressive commission structure. And so we just we were able to upgrade offices to a little bit bigger office. The same building, I started paying a little rent so I could get a bigger office. And they would come in, and we just get in the phone books. And if somebody got a hit, somebody looking for a proposal, they'd just run out of the office. We put a proposal together and just slowly kept
Lot of hustle.
Lots and lots of hustle.
What do you look for then and now when you're hiring people? Because your staff here is just incredible. Like, you instantly feel at home when you walk in here, and you see how massive this has grown.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's important.
So I learned a lot of hard lessons early on. I did a lot of bad hires, and a lot of it had to do with where we were financially.
Right.
I couldn't afford to pay somebody a decent wage. And so, you get what you pay for.
Absolutely.
So I had a lot of knuckleheads working for me early on. One of them, we kept kind of regurgitating. I think I fired him 5 times. And then after the 5th time, it blew up.
I really mean it this time. You're
fired. Yeah,
you're
fired. But I kept, I was like, so yeah, it just was a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
And then a lot of personal development for me,
Because you had no formal training.
None.
In how to do this.
None.
Your motivator was Tony Robbins.
Yep.
Tony's listening, so kudos to
him. Yeah. We hope he is.
Yeah,
right?
he is, totally.
So, no, it was really just trial and error, lots of mistakes, lots and lots of mistakes, lots of wrong hires. But I've learned over the years is that you hire for culture. So that's the first thing we do. And then, so our mantra is kind of like hire for culture, train for skill.
Right.
And so that's
great. That's really, for every entrepreneur should be listening to that.
Yeah. So I think, and then it's also pay people what they need to be paid.
Yes.
So what I had to learn was maybe I can't make that hire right now because what I need to do is get a little more money in the bank before I make that hire, and then hope that great person is there when I can afford them.
Right.
And so it really took me a long time to get that mindset of the culture but then also, at the end of the day, culture is great, but yeah, as through my story, you still got to pay the bills, and people, people are driven by money, and they need to be paid a good wage. And so being able to pay, being able to pull in top talent, like most of my team right now is talent that I've pulled from my competitors. They're all seasoned veterans.
Yeah.
And I pay them to the point where the competitor said, no, you better go work for him because we can't pay that rate.
Right.
And so for me, that's what I think was probably my hardest discovery, was really to pay people what they're worth, and then constantly plug people into their passions. I think a lot of people get plugged into a position in a company just because there's a need, and it's not necessarily what they're passionate about.
Very
and so
true.
I have constant...
You have to love what you do.
Yeah, like you met Chris earlier when he first... so I did an acquisition last year, so some of my team came from that acquisition, and Chris was one of those members. He was actually on the operations team. And so when I did that acquisition, I sat all the team members down, and I was like, what are you passionate about? What drives you? What are your dreams?
Did they probably no one has ever asked me that question.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it was a completely...
Maybe my 8th grade soccer coach, but that was probably it.
Yeah.
We don't ever ask people that.
It was a completely different conversation that they weren't used to. They were already apprehensive about me because I just, are we going to get fired or whatever?
Right.
And then I started having conversations. Well, so we ended up moving Chris from being in the operations team to the director of sales because we want people to drive towards whatever they're passionate about.
Absolutely.
And so I love open dialogue with my team. I love if my girl in accounting, she was actually doing accounting and operations with the old company. But if she came to me and said, you know what, accounting's not my thing, I want to get back into the operations game, we figure that out.
Right.
Like we figure out, okay, how do we make that work?
You feel it when you're in here. It's a very open door, like free flowing. When I met, everybody that was in the building that day, it was very like everybody's cool, everybody's like welcoming, everybody wants to help. It's not like the boss is over here and then they're punching in a number to get in there. It's just a very open spot. It's really impressive.
And we make conscious efforts to go to lunch together, really have
really
that.
Important.
And it's the dynamic of, you always hear this saying like, well, this is my family, this is my work family, this is whatever. And that's a hard dynamic to scale. So it's the balance of how do you maintain the family environment, but still have the ability to scale as an organization. And so we make a conscious effort to still have that family environment, but we're all driven towards scaling. So it's I don't know that most organizations can do that, because I think that most people think in terms of like, I'm going to flip a switch. Like I'm either on a corporate switch or I'm on a family switch.
Right.
And there's no in between. It's like we're either corporate driven, everything's by the numbers. And so to have a dynamic culture, I mean, the joke around here is like we laugh too much around here. I mean, like
it is a
I have to tell them
place.
to tone it down because I'm like, I'm on a Zoom call. Can y'all tone it down in there? You know,
First time I came in, I'm like,
right.
how do I get an office in here? This is an amazing place.
So yeah, and that's, I mean, we work, it's, you know what it is, it doesn't happen overnight, and
Right.
you have to work at it every single day.
Right.
And when you have conflict.
It is true. It has to be cultivated.
It does.
Yes.
And you're going to have conflict, you're going to have disagreements, but how do you process through the conflicts? And I think it's through mutual respect and love.
Absolutely.
You know, I had a major conflict, or no, I wouldn't say a conflict, but a major decision I had to go through here recently in like the last 2 days. And I remember going into that meeting just reminding myself, use the word respect a lot and use the word love a lot.
Yes.
Like make that part of the dialogue, because I think that when you're dealing with difficult situations, people don't want to feel like they're being attacked, or there's some flaw in their personal character, or
Right.
there's something that they did wrong.
There's a trigger that people, if you don't talk to people correctly, you're triggering emotions that could have been there from their childhood or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I think, especially in, you know, corporations and even in the hiring processes, like you see just so many like hardcore micromanaging, you know, and that's intimidating, and that adds to the pressure of working every day. That's hard.
And I think it's being aware of those around you.
Absolutely.
Like being aware of their personality type.
Yes.
Like, are they a people pleaser? Are they shut off because they had some trauma in their life? Like,
Right.
how do you connect with that person?
Yes.
And, you know, that's definitely one of the things that I learned through the Tony Robbins piece was he talks about the negative anchors. You know, like if your dad was abusive and he always touched your shoulder, that's a negative anchor. So if you walk up to somebody and their dad was always abusive and they touch their shoulder, and you walk up and you touch their shoulder, that's an
Trigger.
immediate trigger for
Yeah,
them.
I mean, I work in trauma. These little things that are stored in people's bodies for so long. It's crazy. So how many people are on your staff now?
So we have 22 in this office.
Okay.
We do, our business is a little bit different than, so all of our buildings are cleaned by subcontractors.
Okay.
And so that's also another dynamic, is how do you move culture from employees to the subcontractor dynamic, which we
Yes.
work really hard on that too. And so if you count like all this physical people cleaning buildings and all of that, I think the number's somewhere around 400 probably.
Wow.
It's not
That's a large staff.
Yeah.
How do you keep their culture and them motivated, even though they're subcontractors? Like, are you connected with them, even though they're not in the same spot as you?
So like today's payday, so a lot of them will come to the office. So connecting with them, making sure our ops team is here in the office and we try to schedule that in a small window so that a lot of them come at the same time. So like 3 to 5 this afternoon, you know, interacting with them. I always try to, because I'm getting to the point now where, and it just evolves. I don't necessarily like it, but it evolves because people see me on social media, and
Right.
so they start to think like, oh, that's Dan. Now he's starting to get untouchable. But
Right.
you know, I try to just hang around in the hallway.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the subcontractors I don't know because they're out of state. You know, they went through our recruiting process and they've never actually had a one-on-one interaction with me. And it's just, you know, as business grows and evolves, those things happen. But I try to make a conscious effort of being open and just being available for people.
That's amazing, because that's, I think, what makes people feel untouchable, you know, is that they walk in, they see this beautiful building and a podcast studio, and that you're constantly doing interviews and stuff. And that's an intimidating thing.
And I think I go back to my own self. I've, you know, over the years, I've been intimidated by guys that were kind of in those spots. And I remind myself, like, I don't think I'm a big deal. Like,
yeah.
I don't.
We all crawled before we walked.
Yeah, I'm not a big deal. Like, there's nothing special about me. I just, you know, I happened to figure out a few processes that worked and some things that helped us scale. And, you know, there's I don't know if you've probably heard of, you know, conversations about imposter syndrome. And it's a real thing out there.
It is. Totally.
I think that what happens is guys that start to get developed and moved up, they try to overcome imposter syndrome with almost arrogance, or they start to build this reality that's not true.
Yes.
And so what I have found is that if I just try to keep myself humble, and, you know, one of our company culture pieces is humility.
Yeah.
And so
It shows in everybody in this building, by the way.
Thank
Oh,
you.
every
Thank
single
you.
human being. When I had the pleasure of hanging out with you that afternoon and meeting, you can just feel the family environment. You can just feel the caringness for each other. And it's just a laid back, open door. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because it is in a world where, people come in with the ego bigger than the actual job.
Right. They built their own empire and you're like, really? You shouldn't have an ego
mostly
that
in their
big.
own heads. Right. And
yeah.
but that does.
Yeah.
Especially because, you've had to hustle to start this company.
Lots of grind.
Lots of grind.
Lots of heartache, lots of sleepless nights.
How long is the person that's been with you the longest? How long is
15 years.
15 years? That's a long time to hold an employee in a corporation.
Yeah, and some of our crews we've had clients for, we were talking about one yesterday, we've had for 19 years. One of my first clients we've got, turnover is okay. That's one of the things that I teach, especially when you're onboarding a bunch of new people and you're trying to build teams and you don't always get it right.
Right.
And so I think what happens sometimes in culture is we hold on to people we shouldn't hold on to because we live in fear of what is the net result of that.
In probably every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
I teach my clients, I'm like, you're one uncomfortable action away from this being done.
Yeah.
But we are so conditioned to think about what other people are going to think or we stay in things just way too long.
Yeah.
How do you keep this staff motivated in this office? I wish we could get like a panoramic view of this office. It's the coolest office I've ever been in.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like this is part playground, part office.
Right.
It's very cool.
I love that. And that's really how we want it to be. So keeping them motivated, we do multiple things. Like every Thursday morning, we have leadership training. So we have designated, I think it's about slowing down and making time for people. It's not
every entrepreneur listening. That's the best advice. Slow down and make time for people. Don't be too fabulous that you're untouchable.
Yeah.
Because that just ultimately does not build respect.
No.
With people or longevity.
It doesn't work with your customers.
It doesn't.
I get asked all the time because our name is Integrity Facility with a Y.
Right.
And they ask me all the time, why is it not IES? And a lot of people misspell it and stuff. And that was very intentional because our goal is that every one of our clients feels like they're our only client. Right. And that's how we drive. I remember I had a conversation with one of my clients and I was like, why do you like doing business with us? And he said, because if I didn't know any different, I would think I was your only client.
Right.
Because your customer service is above par. Yes. When I call, you answer the phone. Your reaction times are fast.
And they can get to you.
Yes.
And that's the most important thing. When you're hiring a company for a long time, you want consistency. That's the main thing. And, as entrepreneurs too, we swallow, things are going to happen along the way and you have to be able to make them right.
Yep.
How many business owners do you know that just don't make it right?
They don't.
Just take the money and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one person will tell 6,000 people.
In a minute.
In a minute.
Especially in today's world with social media.
Yes, exactly.
The only thing that I think saves some people is that when somebody has a bad experience, most of us are either professional enough or have enough empathy on the other person that they don't want to blast them publicly.
Right.
Which is probably the only thing that saves a lot of bad business owners because of the fact that there are people like you and me that when we have a bad experience, we're not going to just blast that person for the sake of blasting them because we have enough respect for ourselves to not go to that level.
Yes.
And I think that most people in general are that way. But it comes out in how is a company sustained because eventually the market's going to speak to you.
Absolutely.
Eventually you're going to lose your customers. Eventually nobody's going to want to do business with you. And so as the market speaks, then you either have to have a huge conversation with yourself and be like, hey, I need to see what's going on and make some dramatic shifts. And then you have to think, I have some apologies to make.
Yeah,
absolutely. I have to go to some people and say, you know what, I screwed up.
Yeah.
This isn't this, and one of the things in our culture that I really try, and I this starts with me, is taking ownership of whatever it is. Like, that's my fault. That's not your fault. Like, I allowed this situation to happen. So
that should be in like every aspect of life.
Yes.
As opposed to like, that was totally not my fault. I had nothing to do with that.
Yep.
If more people would do that in every relationship in their life, things would be way easier, because it's the first thing that, you know, we don't want to blame ourselves. And that's great. And you can feel it in this company.
Thank you.
You can totally feel it. Like, these people are just fantastic.
No, thank you.
And they're all just hanging out. Like, this is a great place to
work. Are y'all doing any work?
They must be doing work, Dan. Judging by the office, I think they're doing okay.
They are some of the hardest working people I've ever met.
That's amazing. And they're humble like you are, which is, you know, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to a young entrepreneur looking to scale a business like you did?
I would say, wow, there's so many pieces that I could say on that, but definitely surround yourself with great people. You know, as you've probably heard it 100 times, but you're the sum total of the 5 closest people around you.
Absolutely. I tell people all the time, you are the company you keep. Yeah.
So first thing you do is evaluate who's in your life and whether they're helping you move the needle.
Absolutely.
If they're not on the same page with you to help you move the needle, I don't care if it's your best friend from middle school.
Right.
You have to start thinking about, like, how effectively does this person help me move the needle?
Right.
And so what I try to do is rally people to help move the needle, and then try to figure out which ones are not helping move the needle. And that's not only in business, that's in everything in your personal life.
Absolutely.
You know, if you're driven and you like going to events and you like, you know, reading books and you start, you know, all of these different things, and the person that is next to you is constantly saying, why are you doing that? You're
brought right down to that level.
Yes. Never. I mean, I have some really good friends that have spouses that are nooses around their neck that I know, and I'm not telling them to get a divorce, obviously, because I'm pro-marriage, but, you know, start having conversations with these people. Like, here's the direction I want to go. I want you in my life, but
grow together.
Yeah, grow together. I need to figure out where that piece fits.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the relationships that are just, you know, the negative people or the whatever that are superficial relationships, start screening those and being like, you know what, this person is. I think what happens is we latch on to individuals because we have certain needs we're trying to fill in our own life.
Absolutely.
And so we latch on to maybe even the places where we're deficient because, you know, like minds like to hang out.
Absolutely. So you're filling somebody else's cup, and that's the people pleaser thing.
Yeah.
You know.
So you might be like, well, I have to help this person or whatever, but they're dragging you down. Yeah. So you just have to evaluate.
Part of growing is there's people that are going to fall off.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know, but ultimately we're built to bring ourselves to the whatever level it is, you know?
And what I've noticed is you go to certain levels and you work on yourself, you find better quality people.
Yes.
And so you end up hanging out with better quality people, and then they introduce you to people that are one level above you, and they're, you know.
Right.
And so it ends up just being
the Kevin Bacon effect.
Right.
Tell entrepreneurs, we have a lot on the show, we have a lot listening, how important it is to make connections with people.
So the story I remind myself of is, and this might get too political with the climate that we're in, but when I read Donald Trump's book, and this was before he was president, this was back when he was doing The Apprentice and stuff, he was 600, don't quote me on the numbers because it's been 20 years since I read the book, but I believe he was about $600 million in the hole. Mm-hmm. On the verge of bankruptcy, and I don't remember which of his 5 wives he was married to at the time, but his wife and him were walking down the road, and they saw a homeless person, and his wife said, "Oh, I feel so bad for that homeless guy," and Donald turned to his wife and said, "We're more broke than he is."
Right.
And he said he was sitting on the couch one night, and he was feeling sorry for himself. He was like, I don't know how I'm going to dig out of this hole. He had, painted a picture like he was just, in one of those slumps. And I hardly can imagine him being that way. But,
I know, because he's so like
what he's going through right now. And you're in
I get motivated by him watching him.
Yeah.
Like, let's go. It's
like, how do you go through what this man's going through and keep on ticking? But he was sitting on the couch, and he had been invited to a networking event. And the story has stuck with me for all these years because he was invited to a networking event, He was on the verge of bankruptcy, and he didn't want to go to the event. He was like, I don't want to go to this event. And he showed up, and he got put at a table with a banker.
Wow.
Started having conversations with this banker.
Yeah.
And this one meeting changed his life. Like, he is today where he's at because of one meeting at an event that he went to. And if he would have not gone to that event,
yes,
we might history would have been painted completely different.
It's truly.
And so I remind myself of that when I'm invited to certain places or things that, I'm like, oh, I really don't want to do this or whatever.
Right.
I always think back to that story because you're one person away from a major thing happening in your life.
I tell my clients, I'm like, dream big, and step into that life. What's the worst thing you're going to hear? No. I mean, just network with people and get in rooms with amazing people that are doing amazing things.
Yep.
And that's just a whole club itself. We've sat through meetings together, you and I, and just the energy in that kind of situation of those big thinkers is it's so motivating.
Because they see a different picture than the rest of the world.
Yes.
Yes. And I think people are honestly more afraid of success than they are failure.
Yes.
Because success has to be managed. It has to be, success just doesn't happen on, okay, I've arrived here.
Right.
But success has to be maintained. You have to manage it. You have to wake up every day.
It's the fear. Success is really just the fear of change.
It
is. How is this new thing going to fit into this life? Even though this life isn't really working. It's people's fear of change is enormous.
It is.
But if you just make one small pivot, your whole life could open up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane.
And it could be micro changes. I think what happens is people get too focused on the big change.
Right. Absolutely.
Instead of trying to get to way over there.
Right.
Just make this little tiny change right here.
Yep. 1% every day. So
That's
I tell
all you
people,
have to
I'm
do.
like, if you could spend 15 minutes a day, you'll go to work for people for 8 hours a day, but you won't spend 15 minutes or an hour on your own dreams or your own goals or your own health issues, but you'll go make somebody else money all day long. If you just gave 1/8 of that energy to yourself, you can do anything.
Anything.
I'm a true believer that anybody can be anything they want to be
100%.
with the right mindset.
Yep.
And surrounding yourself by the right people, because so many people are stuck.
Yeah.
It's kind of like sad, right?
It is very sad.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I work with a lot of people, and when I hear them say that they're motivated and they're finally confident in working with teams, wow, they're now the team's really driven. That's amazing. You've just opened an opportunity for people.
Yeah.
I think it's so great. So where's this company going? Are you getting another bougie office? Can I work in that one?
Well, we're going to keep this one for 5 years.
Nice.
My goal is to actually buy a different office. And as far as physical buildings, I want to have an office that I can park all my cars in the lobby.
Right.
So that's kind of my big old dream.
That's cool.
So I want to have I'm slowly working on my car collection. So I'm hoping in 5 years we'll have an office and I'll have all my fancy cars parked in the lobby, and that'll be kind of how people walks in. And then we'll have an office similar to this, but it won't be on the 20th floor. I want to find something that's,
always Dallas-based.
I can't get my cars onto the 20th floor. So.
No. They have some big elevators, but no, you definitely cannot.
So yeah, we're, we'll always be corporate based out of Dallas, but we have, we have a physical office in Shreveport. We have another call center in Kingman, Arizona. So we have physical staff in those locations. We are actually starting a new, completely revamped our business model. You were talking earlier about making changes and the changes challenging. And so for the last 60 days, we've been redesigning our business model, our sales processes. We're going to a more virtual style business with service tickets, and our sales processes are going to be done via Zoom versus in person. And so
that's great.
We're trying to redefine our industry, and we're trying to figure out ways to scale. So every year we do a town hall, and this year our town hall theme was quantum leaps. And so through that, I kept thinking, man, how do you quantum leap a janitorial business? And so this process that we're putting together, I believe, is our quantum leap that will help us really scale at a fast pace. And so it's been an exciting journey and trying to put all of this together. And of course, you know, with anything in timelines, it'll be like, yeah, we're going to do it in 30 days. And then I was joking with the team yesterday. I said, yeah, we'll probably launch August 1st because originally we were trying to go for June 1st, right? That's like a week away.
I know. It literally is like a week. I know. This has been the quickest year like ever.
It is.
Who's your right-hand person?
So I have right-hand people in different departments.
Okay.
So my COO is obviously kind of my right-hand guy, but then my director of operations over the operations team, and then Chris, who you met, is my right hand over the sales department.
Yeah,
and then everybody's on the team is great, but those are my kind of go-to guys where we do all of our strategic thinking and try to push through.
How do you get this team here and the other teams like integrated? Do you have the beautiful facility? Do you have like meetings and motivational things?
So Monday we have is really from 7:45 in the morning until noon is our meetings time. Every Monday we have Bible study 7:45 to 8 o'clock.
That's beautiful.
That's not mandatory. Obviously, I can't force people, but it's just something that I want to be part of our culture. And then at 8 o'clock, we have global meetings. That's just, we go over our numbers and the hoorah session. And then we do speaker rotation. So the staff brings something of whatever is on their mind. It could be motivational. It could be, I did a talk on trust not too long ago. It could be areas where we're starting to see deficiencies built. And so the COO might speak on one thing on a Monday. So there's I'm actually making my daughter get into the rotation on the speaking now. So every week somebody brings something to the table for the Monday meeting, and then we break off into our groups and have meetings. And then on the sales team, we have daily powwows. So the sales team comes together every day at 8 o'clock for 15 minutes just to kind of go over what's up.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's pulling for each other.
Yep.
When you have a sales team, that's so important because it's a cutthroat.
It is.
And now you're all working for the good of the cause. So I think that's incredible.
Yeah, and it's talking through, why is somebody's ratios not where they need to be? Why are we not closing? It's constantly looking at, instead of looking at somebody go, wow, you must really suck as a salesperson. No, there's got to be something bigger than that.
Right.
Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. That comes back to the culture of you, treating these people like family.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, oh my God, the numbers are so bad. And
yeah,
especially in sales, because it's a numbers game.
Yeah, and it's a matrix you can measure, so they feel like they're measured every day by that matrix. Like, oh, I didn't close anything this last month. Okay, well, what's going on? Let's look at the bigger picture. We know you've closed stuff in the past, so we know you have the ability to close. What's going on? Did the market shift on us? Are we getting our pricing off? Like, what's happening? So it's really looking about the whole picture versus just the person as an individual.
Right. Because that's just so much pressure for people, too. That's why sales teams leave.
Yeah.
Because they're being singled out. And I love it. I think it's amazing. So what's the goal for this company?
So the goal is...
What's going to look like in 5 years?
Well, we want to get to 100 million.
Awesome.
So that's the goal. And we probably, now I'm like, well, 100 million might be an understatement. We might be able to do better than that. So
right.
that's kind of I want to get there. I'm 51 years old. So, I had always thought about 55 years old being at the 100 million. And so it's right now is working on processes to figure out how to scale and making sure that the scale is sustainable. Because I think there are things that you can do in the short term that'll help you scale, but how does it sustain over the long term? So that's all part of the process that we're working on right now.
That's amazing. Well, you've done an incredible job.
Thank you.
It shows with every person in here and with yourself.
Thank you.
Do you speak?
I do.
For other teams? Okay, where can we get in touch with you? Where can the audience get in touch?
You can go to cleaninghustle.com, and it's just got a landing page with 3 questions. It's mostly specific towards my industry, but if someone wanted to talk with me and they're not in the industry, I'm cool with that too.
Yeah.
I've kind of been pulled into my industry as there's me and another guy that are kind of being pushed up into the leadership
You're the Tony
roles.
Robbins.
I hope so. For me, it's
not
about,
a bad gig.
For me, I don't, I want to do these podcasts only to bring value to people.
Absolutely.
And, people ask me all the time, well, will you coach me or will you do this? And for me, at the end of the day, if I'm bringing value to that person, then I'm more than willing to help them. I'm actually coaching like 5 or 6 janitorial companies right now, and I haven't charged a penny to any of them.
Yeah,
and it's kind of twofold for me. is that before I commit to something, I want to make sure that it's something that I enjoy, that I want to do.
Yes.
And I may get in the weeds on coaching or doing this and realize this is not something I want to do.
Right.
And so I've committed to the ones that I'm doing now, and I've told them all, don't worry about paying me, because this is something I'm on my own personal journey, and I'm trying to see if this is a direction I want to go.
Right.
Or do I just want to stick with the Cleaning Hustle podcast and bring value through the podcast?
I love the podcast.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah. So it's just now launching. We've got 4 or 5 episodes in the queue. We've published our first one, which was with my best friend. I grew up in the janitorial business with him. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I think the most important for people like you who've grown up and like come through this and started from, I mean, the $8,000 a year story is just a crack up. In this economy,
right.
Good golly, you can't even go to the food store.
No, you can't.
For $8,000. But the philosophy I have, and I treat a lot of people pro bono when I work with groups. I'm like, you help the next one in line.
Yep.
And I just think that's such an important factor.
It's also about full circle. You never know if that person you help is going to become your boss someday.
True.
And I have the perfect example of that. It's the funniest story ever. So probably 6 or 7 years ago, with all of our subcontractors, we did a contest, and it was like a drawing, and it was going to be one-on-one coaching with me. And this one particular lady won the coaching. And so I did like 6 weeks worth of coaching with her. I was trying to help her and her husband build their business. And so we did a weekly Zoom call. We're doing all that. Fast forward, full circle. Now she's a property manager at a building that we're trying to do an RFP on and win the contract.
Right.
So my guys walked in there, and she's like, hey, I know Dan. Like,
right.
Yeah, this is cool.
Moral of the story,
Yeah,
treat people correctly.
So yeah, you never know.
You never know.
Yeah, you
just
never
never
know.
know what's going to
So
come
don't burn a bridge.
Ever. Yeah,
Ever.
I know. And I think that's the biggest thing with people. Their ego becomes so big.
Yeah.
They've made themselves untouchable.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be around this.
And at the end of their life, they're going to sit there and go, where'd everybody go?
Right. Exactly.
If you're building towards a legacy,
yes.
to me, I'm not going to be at my own funeral, but that speaks volumes.
Yes.
And it's funny because it's the most quiet, humble people. I'll give you an example. I lost my younger sister a couple of years ago. It was heartbreaking, 42 years old. She passed away. And so we were doing the funeral planning, and my sister, like, if you go to her Facebook page, she might have had 200 friends, like just a super low-key person, worked at the hospital. Like, you would never imagine in a million years. But we're doing the planning, and her husband's sitting there, and I'm thinking, we need, maybe a room for 50 or 100 people or whatever. And he looks at me and he's like, no, we need at least 300 people, like a big enough room for like 300 to 400 people. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I know my sister. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, seriously. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to follow your lead on this. And lo and behold, 450 people showed up.
Wow.
There was standing room only.
That's incredible.
People standing around and I sat in the front row, and I was just so humbled by the fact.
People remember
and
how you
people
made them
that I
feel.
hadn't seen since I was a kid,
Yes.
people we grew up with were there. And I was just like,
beautiful tribute.
yeah. And it's just like, you know what? It's really about how you affect people in the path.
Yes.
Enough to stop their day and go respect you in death.
Yes, absolutely.
We're all busy.
Everybody's busy.
And so that just took me back, because I was just like, you never would have thought. And then you hear some famous person, and they, it's like they pass away and there's 15 people there. And then you start to realize the core of who that person really is.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, if you have to cut your way to the top, you're not going to survive very long. I truly think you're one of the nicest and most humble humans I've ever met in my life.
Thank you.
You really are. You're just a good friend, and you're fabulous to work with. You'll come back?
Oh, yeah.
Can we watch this grow?
Oh, yeah.
Can we set up by the cars when you get
yeah, definitely.
Well, it was amazing to have you, Dan.
It was,
we are so honored, and thank you for hosting us.
Yes.
And we're going to bring you back again and again and again.
Yeah, I'd love that. That'd be awesome.
Awesome.
All right,
Thanks, Dan.
thank you.